Server meshing is very much a research and development project, and as such, it's not possible to accurately estimate how long it will take. Chris's letter from the chairman carefully qualified the Q4 2023 release date for static server meshing as something we are aiming for, but not guaranteed. I recommend viewing it in that light, as a target we are trying to hit, intended to focus R&D effort rather than actual estimate of how much work is involved. My personal opinion is that this target, while ambitious, is not unreasonable and should allow enough room for us to hit some moderate speed bumps along the way. But if we encounter too many unexpected problems or enough of those problems can't be resolved quickly, then it will obviously impact final delivery date. Clive Johnson, CIG. There's been a lot of debate over the letter from the chairman and Clive's follow-up response about the Q4 2023 release for static server meshing, which got me thinking, and no, this is not a video of me trying to guess when this will be ready or whatever. This video more or less is a thought experiment, which by the end of it will hopefully put some context around the challenges that CIG devs are aiming to tackle before implementing this new tech. Let's start with the current network architecture. Right now, every location and entity in Stanton is being simulated on a single server with a soft player cap of 100. Static server meshing will divide Stanton into zones that will be housed on multiple servers in a single shard. So instead of resources from a single server being stretched across the entire Stanton system, servers will have smaller and more manageable zones to handle. And while this should boost server performance, it's also going to have some unforeseen knock-on effects that the devs are going to have to iron out before a live release. I don't know how CIG intends to define these server zones, but let's say, for example, they define them by the 4 planets, 12 moons, 7 space stations, which include Grimhex, SPK, and INS Jericho, and the 20 Lagrange points. That's a total of 43 locations or server zones for a single shard. And if the player counts per server stay at 100 like they are now, that means Stanton will go from having 100 players to 4,300. Pyro, on the other hand, has 6 planets, 6 moons, and 1 space station, which if we apply the same server logic as before, that would bring its total player cap to about 1,300 players, bringing the total combined player count for Pyro and Stanton to 5,600 players. Let that sink in for a minute. Right off the bat, you might see the uphill battle the devs are facing this year. This raises so many questions for me, like, can a single shard handle 56 or more servers? How will server performance differ from what we see now? How will this affect AI performance? Now that server zones are smaller, how many players can fit on a single server before that server performance tanks? How will this affect player movement across Stanton? What happens when a dynamic event like Jumptown, Ninetales Lockdown, Xenothreat, or Siege of Orison is triggered and all 5,600 players attempt to swarm whatever location it's on? What happens if multiple events are triggered simultaneously? How will the mission system and mission givers keep up with the demand of 5,600 players trying to accept the handful of missions available? Are there enough places to spawn ships? Are there enough hospitals for players to respawn at? Are there enough habs for players to spawn into? The list goes on and on. I'd imagine that it's not necessarily the implementation of server meshing that is the issue here, but it's more or less the knock-on effects that implementing it will have on the game systems we currently have in Star Citizen. I believe that's what Clive really means by the speed bumps. Like, so many things that they have to consider and test first before this can even go live. And I'm not taking away any of the credit from the devs at CIG here, but I'm really just trying to acknowledge the truly monumental task ahead. I know in the past it's been stated that persistent entity streaming is the hardest part of getting server meshing to work, but from my perspective, for whatever that's worth, it's hard to imagine that the margin between the two is all that wide as far as complexity goes. I hope this got you thinking about things a little different, or at least gave you a different perspective. I think for me, this really got me less interested in when this is coming out and more interested in how things are progressing from the development side, because as long as we get periodic updates this year, which I'm sure we will, then for me, the wait won't be as bad. 3.18 is shaping up to be a very, very solid patch, and they've announced 3.19 already, so we know that's coming too. I'm also anticipating another prolonged testing period for Evo and PTU given the nature of server meshing in 4.0. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified for my next video. Peace, love, blessings, and may the force be with you. always.